Conference here in the State House, in the historic State House, regarding transportation funding in the state of Maryland. We're very concerned about this legislation as it's proceeding through this process, and we want to share with you some of our thoughts today on that. The governor submitted a bill, this House Bill 1515, which is a very high number and a very late filed bill. And for such a weighty matter that could impact people's lives directly and our state's economy directly, we believe that this should have been filed more timely and should have been given more due diligence. For all this talk about the importance of our transportation infrastructure, the governor waited until the very last minute to introduce this complicated scheme to raise gas taxes and increase people's cost of living in this state. If Maryland's transportation infrastructure truly was one of the governor's priorities, he would have been working on this proposal over the interim. As late as early January, I was at a conference with people who represent the presiding officers and the administration, and the governor was still non-committal and well into the legislative session, non-committal on his position on raising transportation funding, and now we get this complicated piece of legislation very late in the session. Rather than touring the country to gain political points, he should have been here doing the hard work of the citizens of this state. That's what they deserve. If it were a priority to take a break from the Sunday talk show circuit and get around to appointing a Secretary of Transportation in this state, which he has failed to do. In years past, the governor has again taken the reflexive action of increasing Maryland citizens' taxes by pushing for a gas tax increase that will remove over $2 billion from their wallets over the next 6 years. Let me repeat that, over $2 billion from the taxpayers of Maryland over the next 6 years. So this bill is now before us. Our caucus will continue to fight for the most frequently forgotten interest group in Annapolis, and that is Maryland's taxpayers, beleaguered taxpayers, I might add. I'd now like you to hear from some of our very well-spoken and well-thought-out caucus members on the specifics of our thoughts on this bill. And first we'll go to Delegate Ron George from the capital city of Annapolis. Delegate George.
Thank you so much. Delegate Ron George, I want to put this in a historical context for you. This is the first time in history of this state that a tax has been indexed to inflation. It is both the first time and perhaps the worst time for the governor and the General Assembly to foist this onto our Maryland citizens. Indexing makes tax automatically increase without any input from the General Assembly. It eliminates the authority of the General Assembly to increase or reduce this tax as it sets increases on autopilot. The gas tax will be Governor O'Malley's legacy, continuing to increase long after he has moved beyond the State House. His legacy of the eternal gas tax will continue to haunt Maryland motorists for many, many decades to come. Thank you. Turn it over to Andy Serafini.
Thank you, Delegate Andrew Serafini from Western Maryland. As Delegate George said, and I believe you have a worksheet that was passed out to you, was done by Delegate Hsu and confirmed by the Department of Legislative Services. If we look at the current rate and simply use a 2.5% inflation rate, you could see that the total tax on this could increase by as much as 88% by fiscal year 2017. And that means that Marylanders could be paying 44 cents more per gallon in Maryland taxes alone. These rates could skyrocket, they could skyrocket, they could double, triple. Listen, if you go back and check the math, when President Obama came into office, gas was under $2 a gallon. We've seen it spike over $4 a gallon. Worldwide production is only limited, but worldwide demand is growing as we see emerging markets in China and in other areas demand for it. We also know the uncertainty and the unstableness of Iran and the Middle East. As any of those things happen, those prices could double and triple, and yet there are no provisions in this that would ratchet it back. It can only go up. And so even a short reflexive jump in prices would lock these prices in with no ability if gas prices did come back down to do that. Currently, we know, according to AAA, Marylanders are spending 7.2% of their income on gasoline. And gasoline prices touch everything. It's not just going to be at the pump. It's going to be when you go to the grocery store. It's going to be when you go to any place of business. In my business, when prices spiked a couple years ago, the trash company put a fuel surcharge on. UPS put a fuel surcharge on this. We're going to pay for this tax multiple times over. The fact that it impacts diesel will also drive diesel, which is how most of our goods and services are delivered to us. So this is far-ranging. It's interesting that it's indexed, and it's indexed to inflation. Well, as we add to the price of gas, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's going to be exponential growth because we, in fact, are going to add to inflation that Marylanders are going to experience. And last thing I'll say, wages have not increased because this is a jobless recovery, and yet the cost of living as it goes up puts people, the individuals, in a much more difficult stance. I'm going to ask Delegate Sue Allman to come behind me and add to this conversation further. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Delegate Sue Allman from Baltimore County. This bill, House Bill 1515, does nothing to protect the Transportation Trust Fund from being raided. It requires 3/5 of any standing committee to raid the Transportation Trust Fund. 3/5 majority is no challenge, considering the makeup of their committees and the gamesmanship that can be played. As we've said before, this bill indexes an excise tax on inflation. We're going to hit inflation. And this has it automatically goes up, and there's no stopping it. There's no cap. It goes on year after year. This bill also establishes a 1% tax on the retail price of gasoline collected at the wholesale level. This new tax increases to 2%